Hello, everyone, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. And today, as usual, we have Jeff York from the Establishing Shot. And I wanted to discuss the topic of war because, well, as everyone in America knows, we are going to war right now again. And it's something that it's just a never-ending series of history repeating itself. And when we pitched the idea of war movies, I added Paths of Glory, and one because I'm a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. I think he's the greatest living director ever, and two because it's an anti-war film that we don't see a lot of even to this day. But before we get into that, Jeff, would you like to give us a little synopsis of Paths of Glory and your thoughts on the film?
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's a fascinating film because I think it is sort of simple in some respects in its plot, but the emotions and the nuances of the human characters who are dealing with this sort of made up problem, if you will, in some respects, is where it gets the film gets its complexity from. It takes place during World War I in northern France in 1916, and there's this hill that's sort of the no man's land, which we've always seen in these French World War I films. Even it's talked about in Wonder Woman a couple of years ago.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It's kind of no man's land where they can't get any leverage against the Germans. It's very well defended piece of land. And anyway, the French Major General Georges Brulard, he orders his subordinate Brigadier General Paul Maro to take the anti-hill to try to get some leverage going in this fight. And Maro doesn't want to because he's a fairly smart and shrewd military man, knowing that it's going to put them all out there as sitting ducks. And that's why it's called no man's land, because nobody can really do anything about it and take over it. And they didn't have Wonder Woman back then. But then Brulard, ever the sneak, the conniving man that he is, probably that's how he got to be a major general, convinces them that there's a promotion in it if they at least try and get, show acts of bravery and all this kind of stuff. So Maro is quickly, with his ambitions, persuaded to do so. And of course, it goes spectacularly wrong against the good plannings and good attitude of Colonel Dax, who's played by the star Kirk Douglas, who also produced this film, even though he says it's not a good idea to do it for all the reasons that Maro himself said. Maro orders him to do it. And he sends all the men out there. And of course, it's a disaster. And they're looking for somebody to blame. And it comes down to three guys, one picked from each of the sort of squadrons or units, I guess, that were companies that were fighting and trying to take this anthill. And they're quickly court-martialed in kind of a kangaroo court, with Dax defending the three soldiers because he used to be an attorney when he was back home. And, it's all to sort of cover up the sins of the generals who are making all of these decisions and the wonderfully Tony mansions that they plot their war strategy from, while all the other people are, sitting there, getting dirty and wet from being in the trenches in these awful dugout, sort of places where they have to sit and wait for everything. And it really becomes a sort of a story about Dax trying his best to sort of stick up for his men and assign blame to where it really belongs. And yet, because, as you said, it's a war film and an anti-war film, nobleness and good oftentimes does not necessarily claim victory in such films. And it's a very dark film because of it. Dax loses, and he yells at his major general, who laughs at him and basically says that he's disappointed in him. But then he reminds him that they're going to have to go out there and do it again. And ultimately, at the end, the film ends with them having to just go back to being soldiers. And that includes sort of getting over the deaths of their comrades, as wrong as they were, and to have to experience. And to find, I guess, a little bit of joy where they can. They're all in a bar at the end. It was considered a controversial ending at the time, but I think it's saying a lot of things about moving forward and, having to live another day and put your face and head sort of to the wheel as a soldier and find the levity where you can, and then sort of buck up for the next battle that could be your last one, as well as, the German girl who sings and is sort of a victim too, that they maybe connect a little bit to her, and the enemy is a real person, not just this thing on the other side of the anthill that they're shooting at and never seeing their faces. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, hopefully. But, it really comes down to the generals make these political decisions to bolster their careers. They go horribly awry. And of course, rather than take the blame themselves, they need to find a couple of men that they assign for cowardice for the stunned failing, and quickly court-martial them and basically assassinate them, as the firing squad does, to make examples of them. So case closed, all done, move on with the war, and the generals continue to sip their tea and sit in their nice cozy chairs in their warm mansions, plotting the demise of these poor grunts.
Yeah, it's a very telling film, because there's a lot of anti-war movies and there's a lot of war movies, but a lot of war movies are more concentrated. And this is 1957; movies weren't as graphic back then. But a lot of war movies just kind of copy what Saving Private Ryan did, where they show the gruesomeness and the intensity of battle, but they don't really get into the politics of war. And this film is it's like, what's more horrifying than even like the big trench run scene is the fact that these are people who are being used by the higher ups in the military so then they can further their careers. And it's very telling to today, or to any war, where you have someone who starts a war and nobody wants to take blame. Everyone says they don't know what they're doing. As we were saying before we were rolling the episode, there was that whole press conference with Trump where he said, neither of these guys know what they're doing. And it's funny, because we have people who throughout history in wars don't know what they're doing, and they try to place blame on people who can't essentially defend themselves. And really is a class warfare sort of picture about the institutions that are supposed to represent us that end up using us and failing us. And basically, I mean, you think about World War I, it's like trying to figure out what the war was even about. Like, we know Archduke Francis Ferdinand got killed, which pretty much catapulted the war, but then everyone kind of had their own little reasons for getting into the war, none of which are that good. And this film is pretty much telling us, yeah, this is the consequences of war. This isn't a movie about honorary and bravery. This is a movie about cowardice being rewarded, while the brave ones are the ones who end up getting the shaft. And
that's right. Paying for the sins of their sort of pseudo fathers, if you will. No, it's funny you say that, Mike. I think it's actually kind of the oldest story in the book in some respects, and that is that while we can applaud and certainly rally around any soldier, any enlisted man, any person who's in the trenches like they are here, fighting and doing what they're doing to defend their country or fight for their cause, bravo to them in many respects. They believe what they're doing and clearly have risked their lives and maybe making the ultimate sacrifice, or potentially having that happen. It could happen any day when they're out there. So we laud that. And yet, so many of the reasons that people go to war are for selfish and petty reasons. They have not exhausted diplomatic channels. The destruction of human life and property and everything else is and should be a last resort. And yet it never is. I mean, we've got war constantly with us today, no matter how many bombs or drones or technology or open communication channels or global communications and global economies. It's just amazing how petty people still get. And it's all about being macho and, who has the biggest bombs, as George Carlin once said. We only make bombs now, and we make big bombs because that's what we do, and we do it good, and we like to bomb brown people. And here they're not bombing brown people, but they are bombing an enemy that probably has more in common with them than anything. It's funny too. The one of the films qualities and characteristics, I guess you would say, Mike, of it that I hadn't remembered exactly, though I suppose if you said, Jeff, do you remember this? I would have said, oh, of course. But even though it takes place in World War I in France, nobody has a French accent in this movie. Yeah. They're all speaking in basically American accents and a little bit of tinge of British in them. But I think that was also intentional, because I think what
Yeah.
Kubrick and the filmmakers wanted to do is say that this is a universal problem, and if we don't think this is happening in America, I mean, Korea and Vietnam, as we were about to go into, were just the start of sort of these kind of things. We're like, what are we doing here? This is not fighting fascism like we did in World War II, and yet in the 50s it was very unpopular to criticize the war machine and the American soldier and the American war efforts and even peacekeeping or whatever we were doing. But we were doing terrible things in toppling governments and meddling in South American countries and Central American countries and the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it gives a universal flavor to this, that it may be about World War I, but it is really kind of in some respects timeless, because this is about war no matter what war it is, no matter what country it is, and no matter what the accents are.
Yeah, and the funniest thing is like this movie. There was a quote from Stanley Kubrick that I captured, and he told the New York Times journalist, "Man isn't a noble savage; he's an ignoble savage or ignoble savage. He is irrational, brutal, weak, silly, unable to be objective about anything where his own interests are involved." That about sums it up. I'm interested in the brutal and violent nature of man because it's a picture of him, and any attempts to create social institutions or false view of the nature of man is probably doomed to failure, which pretty much defines most wars. Like, the man, instead of fighting a greater threat that could kill us all, like, you have, I mean, global warming back then wasn't a big thing, but now we have that. We have global poverty, and instead of helping each other, we're savages who want to kill each other. And this movie really kind of captures that savagery of man without having to get into graphic warfare detail. One thing I love about Kubrick is he is a master of the camera. I mean, the guy started when he was a kid. He was like a photographer for a
Right.
magazine in New York City, and he could see everything through the lens in a way
Yep.
other directors still can't. The dichotomy of the scenes is really amazing. You have, for instance, as you were pointing out earlier, you have these scenes of the trench warfare where the camera's following Kirk Douglas as he's walking around the trenches, getting his men ready, trying to start the battle. And then you cut to General Monroe, who he's kind of doing like a military propaganda thing where he's walking up to everyone. He's saying, "So, are you ready to fight more German soldiers today?" And he's putting on this happy face, and then he runs into this one soldier who's just stricken from shell shock.
Yep.
And there's a great line in it where Moreau turns to one of the other men and he says, "What's wrong with this guy?" And he says, "He has shell shock." And he goes, "There's no such thing as shell shock." And of course, we saw how well that aged. And
Right.
now we still have more soldiers saying, "Be a man, don't be scared, go into war, kill each other." And I think it's men's testosterone, their masculinity, that really leads them to savage places, because they're taught you can't cry, you can't be weak, even when they're being taken out to be executed. There's that scene where Tim Carey is just wailing, crying, and the priest who's holding his arm is like kind of telling him to pull himself together. But it's like,
Right.
you're about to get shot. What do you expect? But
Right.
yeah, he shows those great scenes where they kind of match, and it's a very similar motif of Kubrick, where he'll use a long take to track a character to sort of see like what's racing through their minds at the moment.
Right.
And he'll show the dichotomy between the dirty trenches filled with dirt and grime and explosions, and then you get these lush, beautiful mansions that all these guys are doing their conferences in. And just the amount of greed that are in those mansions, the way they have the frame where the character, he always loves to use a wide depth of field instead of a shallow one. Although
Right.
movies in the 50s were more reliant on shallow depth of field because they still haven't found like their cinematic language wasn't like fully interpreted until like the 90s, I think. But before that time, the movies highly stylized, like every shot has an intention and a purpose, and not a single frame is wasted, because Kubrick isn't the kind of director who just shoots a million shots of coverage and then does your master shot. Like every shot is a master shot, every shot showing how greedy these guys are with their surroundings, and you also kind of get the idea of that you're constantly marching into a death zone when they have the long trench shot of everyone going across the trenches and trying to get into the French enemy, or not the French enemy line, but the German enemy line. The camera tracks them for a very long time as there's nothing but explosions and chaos going on. And then, of course, you kind of match that with all the shots of people either marching to their death or marching to get their soldiers prepared for death. And it's all just this long sort of dream/nightmare sequence of not only the horrors of war, but the hypocrisy behind it, and how we're just always walking towards sort of like that light at the end of the tunnel that's going to just close up on us.
I think that's right. And Kubrick certainly thinks about every shot very precisely. I mean, so many of the shots in this are juxtaposed against contrast. Again, not only the lush sort of surroundings that almost look like a gentleman's club for these generals who don't really get dirty, don't really get down into the nitty gritty, into the trenches, literally and figuratively, that Dax does with his men. And, of course, that's why, the one general would not know that, there was such a thing as shell shock, because he's never been on the front. He's never really been that close to war. At least maybe if he did as a younger soldier, he's forgotten it by the time he's been kicked upstairs. The other thing too is I think that what Kubrick does too is he makes everything seem very real. It's shot outside. It was shot in West Germany. They couldn't get rights to shoot it in France because it's very anti-French in its way. But you feel the grit, you feel the cold, you feel the mist and the rain and the dirt and the fear and the claustrophobia, and all those things are really kind of new here, that wasn't shot in a Hollywood studio. So he insists on this sort of authenticity to it. I also think he's very good with actors and picking terrific people. And it was Kirk Douglas's project, but Douglas is perfect for Dax, because Dax is a man who does all that his soldiers do. He doesn't ask them to do anything that he doesn't do either. In fact, he leads them out trying to take the anthill, which is a useless and sort of fruitless exercise, and yet he's leading them because he's that kind of soldier, where these other men look like they're probably out of shape and they're ancient and they're so stuffy and you said it earlier too, Mike. There is a class system in this film. The people who can't defend themselves and don't have a voice, the enlisted grunts, they're oddballs and sort of misfits, and the people who are afraid don't know anything. They've been probably snatched from the factories or the farm place and placed into these things to be soldiers, and they don't even know what the hell they're fighting for. They certainly don't know why they're suddenly taking the anthill when they know they can't take it. But it's funny, because I think one of the things that Kubrick was very much ahead of the time, and we talked a little bit about this, is that that it was very much an anti-war movie. And even though war movies generally are very pro-war because they glorify it and make it exciting, and a lot of times we cheer on the good guys and it's all scored so well and shot so well, even though those same things are true here in many respects, this is to me showing the tension and the ugliness of it in all regards. I don't think there's anything, maybe until the final end where they're in the saloon, and even that's kind of sad and tragic in its way, where there isn't a darkness or an edge to everything that's going on, because war does not give you any real downtime. It doesn't give you any time to relax unless you're rich generals who don't have to get their hands dirty and let the lower class do the dirty work for them. And because of that, I think this movie was very controversial for a long time. And you said you hadn't seen it in a while or couldn't get to it. It's a hard film to find, and it always has been. I mean, the French didn't show it until I think 1972, so they sat on it for almost 2 decades. And it was very well received by critics by and large, and it's only sort of risen in stature since then. I mean, I would argue that it's probably within the top 3, if not 5. Probably greatest regarded war films of all times, at least by the critical community. But it was controversial at its time. It didn't get a single Oscar nomination. Critics were very uncertain of how to approach it, because it was coming right off of Saving the World from Hitler and Fascism, a very anti-war statement, and it was going back to World War I, which we won, and it was seemingly turned out all right, and yet this was very much against just the general rules of war that even that one exemplified. So, it was ahead of its time. It was controversial for its time, and in some respects, I think it's still probably controversial today, especially when it ties into, I think, things that you were talking about earlier. You can't help but look at Trump's obliteration quotes that he insists upon. They have to be. It can't just be we did a good job and we found our targets, but we don't know if we've really annihilated or obliterated the program. But the cover story, the press on it, the jingoism, the machismo that surrounds the delivery of it all becomes silly. I mean, Pete Hegseth is just like strutting about like a prideful cock of the walk, yelling at Fox reporters who just happen to be female for not covering it properly. And it's so funny when you're watching this film, talking about it today, how quickly all this sort of seems relevant, even to what's going on with Gaza or what's going on with Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. It's like, what is this for? It's for ego. I mean, does he want that country all tattered and torn like that? Yes, as long as he can say it's his. Will he rebuild it if he wins it? No, he probably won't. But he can say it's his and he won it because it's all about, some sort of a testament to his prowess. And I'm not sure what Netanyahu is doing. He probably wouldn't even be in power if it wasn't for him keeping up the war on Gaza. And then, you have Trump, who's faced a whole bunch of bad press the last 3 months. And then suddenly it's like, well, we're going to help do this war thing when we're not supposed to. And then, they're sending out mixed signals because they can't even get their story straight on what they want it to be. Is it the total annihilation? Is it a regime change? Did we obliterate it? Well, we did, but we didn't. Well, no, they're saying that, well, we have to wait. And I mean, it's just, and then you sort of miss what the whole thing was about. And I'm not sure it was necessarily about trying to push back Iran's nuclear development. They've been talking about that for 40 years. Netanyahu's been talking about, well, they're weeks away from getting a nuclear bomb for 22 years. So, this film is just a reiteration and a reminder that even though this is from 57 and here we are in 2025, not much has changed.
Yeah, it's really about how truth ends up getting drowned out for lies.
So
because because of these guys who they place the blame, because originally what George Moreau wants to do is he's talking to Bernard, was it?
Right.
No, Paul Moreau was talking to George Bernard. I'm sorry. And he says to him in the movie, I'm trying to remember the quote. Well, I'll go to another scene before I go back to that. But like originally, Moreau doesn't want to do the assignment because he thinks it's impossible. But immediately when Bernard brings up the idea that, well, you can get a promotion from this, he goes, well, I guess.
Yeah, he starts to talk himself into how it might be handled. Maybe they could do it, which is just so political. And, and it's about one man, but he's willing to make the sacrifice that he just talked about a minute earlier with his men to get that promotion. But and Brulard is he's selling it like it's selling a car to somebody. In fact, he never kind of loses that glib, jovial, almost happy uncle kind of laughter to his delivery, which is just ridiculous. But he must be really enjoying the spoils of war, sitting in his mansion plotting strategy.
I feel like Moreau is a character who actually was in warfare, and he feels like he's paying his dues now because he has that huge scar across his face.
That's right. That's right.
Is actually a real scar from the actor who played him because he got into a car accident and it caused
George
that.
McCready,
George McCready, and he and that works because I feel like his character feels something like, well, you know what? I've spent my time in the trenches. I have this scar to prove it. So here, I'm going to take this assignment that's impossible. I'm going to dump it on, was it Colonel Dax or? Yeah. Okay. So he dumps it on Colonel Dax because he doesn't want the responsibility for it. And then even worse, he opens fire on his own men.
Well, that was to drive them to get back to stop retrenching, retreating and retrenching. And then of course, at the end, Brulard uses that against Moreau after promising him a promotion. He's going to use that to get him fired and maybe ultimately court-martialed for that act, which again, Moreau is going too far. But then again, he wasn't thinking rationally as soon as he talked himself out of not storming Ant Hill, because I love the fact too that it's called Ant Hill. Like in case anybody missed it, that's how puny and sort of feudal this. It's not even like a major thing. It's just the anthill. What? But it's there, and it becomes the MacGuffin, if you will, for all this stupidity that these men are trying to prove themselves with, and end up proving nothing except that they were cowards and really awful, awful people.
Yeah, and really to make Morose even worse than just firing on his own men is that originally when they want to find blame on someone, he suggests killing like 100 men.
100 men.
Yeah, and
Putting
Bordeaux goes, hey,
yep,
that's crazy. Even I'm not that bad.
yeah.
Like
we need those men, for heaven's sake. At the very end, you at least think, well, that's at least a couple, groups of whatever you call them, infantries that we would not want, regiments that we wouldn't want to take out. It would be, let's the enemy kill them. We don't need to kill them. So they pick three, sort of saps picked for various reasons, almost like a bad lottery, except, they're assigned to it because I guess they're expendable. But yeah, I mean, so Moreau is making terrible decisions, and arguably he should have been fired, and Dax would be a suitable replacement. But who knows what would happen to Dax under the tutelage of Brillard? He might have. I don't think he would have. I think he would have fought it, and he did fight it, even in not biting his tongue here. But it just goes to show you that there are no friends in those situations, and you're always expendable, no matter what your rank is.
Yeah, and the fact that the one person who is noble in the movie, which is Kirk Douglas's character, he's he used to be a criminal defense lawyer, and he thinks he can defend these men. But immediately when he tries to defend them, it's just like a kangaroo court. They just want.
Well, they don't even have a they don't even have a stenographer. So there's no record of it. It's like, it's ridiculous, and he knows that it's lost, but he tries it anyhow. I think, if nothing else, to to show the three men that at least there was some effort put forward to it, so they weren't just completely assigned to this certain death without any chance to try to defend themselves. But it's terrible. In fact, I have to say, I think that's one of the reasons too that the film is probably not given as much its due, because I think seeing those three men, and Kubrick doesn't cut away from it. He doesn't make it minimal. He insists that we watch it from the beginning to the end, and it's really not truncated in any way. It's drawn out, and it's just awful. And you watch it today, and you kind of are shocked that was done in 57. I mean, there have been some films along the way that you're like, really, that was done? I mean, I still can't believe Hitchcock got away with what he did in Psycho, even though, technically you don't see the blade ever stabbing and causing a wound, but still, it's like she's naked and it's awful, and there's so many cuttings and slashings.
All over the bath
it's
water.
Terrifying, Thank God it was in black and white. I mean, that was the wisest decision I think Hitchcock made right off the bat, is to do it in black and white. But here, we see this, and it's awful. And I mean, I think we're really feeling not only Dax's dread as he watches this happen, helplessly unable to do anything else about it, and these three guys who don't deserve this at all, and yet they're put up there and tied up, and as you said, told to shake it off, or stand up, and oh my God, it's shattering, and it's a. But that's I think we get so used to the glorification of war, and we had Audie Murphy and some of these things before, and there were great films and stuff that showed the difficulty of being in war, whether it was Sergeant York or Coming Home from War, Best Years of Our Lives. Heck, The Bridge on the River Kwai, which was made, I think, just a year earlier, was this glorious Panavision David Lean film, which was very dark and very brutal and just awful about the mind, how the mind goes and everything else. But this one, because it was so, dare I say, almost silly in what was the reason for them storming the hill, and then the reason for them putting these three men to death after the court-martial, it lends another layer of just horror to it that is hard to shake, especially as you're watching it happen right in front of you, without any of those sort of careful edits to help our eyes digest it a little bit easier.
Yeah, and there's like some really dark moments of humor too in it. Like when they're trying to take the hill and it failed the first time, Michael Douglas is trying to rally all his troops so they can go up the hill again. Immediately when he climbs up the ladder, a body like knocks him down.
Yeah,
and
Kirk Douglas.
Just like, we're just like,
and he's Yeah, and he's very good, and you know, he kind of expresses the rage for all of us too. Like particularly when he gets in the room with Brillard at the end, and is kind of raging at him, and like, I would really, you know, and just the sort of typical Kirk Douglas,
Yeah, like
rich
you're
little
a
imitation that
degenerate,
people do of him, where
simple
he's
man. You
talking
should
through
go
his
to
teeth
hell,
and
my
yelling and
friend.
you go
Fuck
to hell, that kind of
you.
stuff.
Yeah.
Which is great, you know, and he kind of expresses the rage for us. But then, of course, he's countered by Adolphe Menjou, who, as I said earlier, was mostly known for playing really kind of affable, you
Mhm.
know, kind of charming gents, if you will. If anything, you know, he was kind of a you know, kind of a roguish older man in most of his roles, and very likable as an actor, but deliberately cast because, you know, he doesn't play it differently. He plays it the same way he would play those other roles, but what
Mhm.
he's given to say and act is absolutely reprehensible.
Yeah. And there's a great moment about patriotism in the movie that I have like a little 17-second clip of that
Hmm,
kind of defines what the entire movie is about. Let's take a
sure.
Patriotism may be old-fashioned, but show me a patriot and I'll show you an honest man.
Well, not everyone has always thought so. Samuel Johnson had something else to say about patriotism.
And what was that, may I ask?
Well, nothing really. He said it was the last refuge of the scoundrels, sir. I'm sorry, I meant nothing personal.
And it's funny because
Last refuge of a scoundrel.
patriotism does lead to a lot of scoundrel-like behavior, such as what these guys do here, such as what happened in Iraq when they said they had weapons of nuclear destruction, and of course they didn't, and that fell apart for Bush. Or the war in Vietnam, where basically we were trying to stop the spread of communism, so Ho Chi Minh couldn't make like the whole a country a communist led nation. And of course, our involvement just made things worse there, where we got involved in something that we shouldn't have gotten involved in. And it was all behind the guise of, hey, let's go, America, rah, 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 get behind your flag, get behind your country. And guess what? If you're just promoting everything your country's doing, never questioning it, just being a loyal lapdog, that's not patriotism. Patriotism is when you question your country and you challenge it and you try to make it better. So this movie is very unpatriotic, and there's also a bit of irony in the beginning when they're playing the opening credits. They play the, and I hope I'm saying this right. I don't speak French, but they're playing the La Marseillaise, you know,
I'm
the
say.
French anthem.
Mhm.
Yeah, Marseille. And the whole idea is like this patriotic theme that's playing. But the whole irony is that this is very anti-France. This is very anti-military. This is
Right.
very much a movie that is about how patriotism can blind our decisions and turn us into monsters because we are worshiping a flag instead of each other. And it really is sort of like the last refuge of a scoundrel when you think about it.
Well, the other thing too that I think that scene illustrates is that, um, you know, when you don't have proper plans and a real strategy, then you end up defaulting to like, well, are you with us or are you against us? Are you a patriot or not? And we tend to wrap ourselves in the flag when we have a good battle plan. But a good battle plan is the key to winning any skirmish, any battle, any war. And yet it's so amazing how many times that the proper plans are the reason. Not having proper plans are the reasons that a lot of countries lose. I mean, the British standing up in a row and letting the American patriots from the American Revolution mow them down, because that's just how you fought. Gentlemen fought standing up and being sort of this line of wall of courage. It's like, well, that was stupid when these ramshackle people who didn't know how to fight and weren't trained properly were just hiding and shooting where they could. And so, you know, just some of those kind of strategic things help. Or, you know, the fact that during World War II, one of the things that usurped Hitler's march, even though he did it so effectively the first year or so, was that he was spending so much more money on the elimination of all the undesirables, from the 6 million
Mhm.
Jews to the 5 million or so other undesirables, be they leftists or gypsies or handicapped or homosexuals, whomever. You know, he also didn't plan on the Russian war because he didn't care to think that maybe somehow, even though they had this great war machine going, that yeah, the cold can get to even, you know, a winning group of forces. And then ultimately, you know, you said it with the Iran plan. I mean, we go into, you know, we went to Iraq, rather, excuse me, went into Iraq back with George W. Bush, and mission accomplished. He puts up that big banner after the thing, and yet they hadn't really planned as good war maneuvers and planning are and stuff are done on, well, what do you do afterwards? Because it's not like you're going to get 10 people to sign the surrender order and they agree to this and these are the laws now that they're following. It wasn't quite as clean as that, and so it never really ended. And this is how a lot of wars end these days, where they don't have these peace talks or these contracts signed that officially declare that the war is over and somebody lost, and here's what they've agreed to do as the losers going along with what the winner says. So, in Germany, in Japan, when America and the Allied forces won those, they made everybody sign these war documents that said, not only have we surrendered, but this is what we're going to do afterwards. And the Germans rebuilt their country, mostly with, the Russians and some other Allied forces supervising. But, the average, Hans and Greta had to get out there and, move all the rubble themselves. And same with Japan. So, all those kind of things need to be thought out. And here, this movie to me is about the frivolity of not planning. Like, well, you could get a promotion and, well, we can just take somehow like storming the hill is going to be any different than it was when they figured that it wasn't working a year or whatever it was beforehand. They don't have any counter to it. They're coming back and then they're being fired upon because, well, no, you have to keep going. You have to keep fighting. Well, not if I'm just going to get mowed down and it's not gaining us an inch. There's no plans there. So I think, to me, this also points to not only wrapping yourself in patriotism as a perhaps last vestige of a scoundrel, but if you are wrapping yourself in the flag and pulling out the patriot card, you probably don't have a very good plan to win the war because you had to do that. That doesn't persuade anybody, or if it does, it doesn't that much anymore. You need to have a smarter, well thought out sort of strategy here, and I think there's no strategy in this. In the regiment here, and I think we've just talked about some others that these are why wars fall apart, because the strategies become screwed up.
Yeah, and I want to correct myself on one point. I said that Ho Chi Minh wanted to spread communism throughout all of Vietnam. It was stopping it from spreading across southern Vietnam, or South Vietnam. Yeah. But anyways, just so then people don't say I'm illiterate and
I mean, the fact of the matter is we were very anti-communist still then. That was the big threat. Right after Hitler was vanquished, we started to worry about Stalin and the spread of communism and Castro and the Bay of Pigs. And I mean, it was a 30-year clusterfuck, if I dare say, because so terrified of the spread of communism, which it was just to spread fear. It's to spread fear and intimidation, and that's what they do in this movie. For instance, when they tell Kirk Douglas, when General Maro is telling him, well, you know what, you're too tired to do it, that's fine, we'll permanently furlough you from your men, meaning like we'll let someone else have them die. And he doesn't want more men to die without his supervision, so he decides, okay, fine, I'll take the anthill. I know it's impossible, but I'll do it because you're scaring me into doing it. And then when they kill all those soldiers, they want to set an example of them. And there's that really just reprehensible line from General Bordeaux where he says, your men died beautifully. Like, really? You killed your own men and you think that's beautiful? Okay, wow, you're a psychopath. But that's the problem. We have people who I think maybe they come in with the right ideals, the right sort of morality, but then it gets skewered and twisted within the military because people want to rise to power, and power corrupts people. And it's really like these guys can't exceed these military plans because man's reach can't exceed their grasp. And they're not thinking ahead of time about how they're going to win this fight. So what do they do instead? They spread propaganda. They say, okay, fine. You want to be subordinate. You don't want to follow orders. We'll kill you. And now you're going to do what we say, aren't you? And that's sort of the whole bullying tactic behind war in general. And like, there's hardly any wars that I feel like are justified. Like the only one I can really think of is World War II. Because, well, first off, there was Pearl Harbor, but more importantly, Hitler was trying to take over the world, and we had to stop him. But
World War One, like who is really the real enemy? Does anyone know? There's a great documentary called "They Shall Not Grow Old," and they took like this World War One footage, they modernized it, they moved it to like 24 frames per second or what appears to be it. They colorized it, added sound to it, and all the men's confessions in that movie, because the narrators of the movie are just sound bites from interviews from other soldiers in the war. And when there's a striking moment where they said, you know, at a certain point, the Germans surrendered and we were just like hanging out and having cigarettes and just casually talking. And we had no idea what the hell we were doing there, like why we were fighting each other. We were like almost friends at that point. Once they surrendered, we just hung out. And that's the saddest thing about this is a story about how we use patriotism, fear, and intimidation to really skewer anyone's mind, whether it be someone watching the war or being in the war, to support war, because that's what the noble thing is to do, according to these higher ups. It's to kill or be killed and to basically gain your superiority, because a lot of life, you know, according to a lot of people's theology, it's a screwed up game of winning or losing. You know, and instead of thinking about what's the right thing to do, they don't want to lose the war. So they'll do anything in their power to no matter how immoral it is, so then they can win, and then they can say we're winners. But what
Right.
do those bragging rights really mean when you're on your deathbed? Like, how are you really going to be remembered?
Well, they so often come down to the economics of something. You know, it's always over sort of money and business and power, and those are, I guess, always the battles, whether they're in you know, whatever company or on the war front. But you're right. I mean, I think that you could look at the war from, you know, whatever side you're on, you're defending your interests in it, and somebody wants to somehow make sure that you don't get what you think you deserve, or they want to take something away from you. The one thing that I think that is fascinating about this movie, and it kind of points to, I think, a lot of the mistakes that have been made, at least in the last 50 or 60 years of warfare, where, you know, it's been messy and it has not been as clean or as, you know, sort of done as we have talked about a little bit here tonight, with, you know, having to sign treaties and sign accords and sign pieces of paper that say that you have lost and you are going to do this now. But they're badly planned and they haven't thought them through. And even though in the Pentagon and all the worlds of war in any country, they're supposed to look at various outcomes and counter outcomes, and what would you do to this? It's kind of like a big chess game, and yet it's amazing how sloppy and bad they are. And a lot of times, to your point earlier, Mike, and I think this movie's getting at it too, is what is the headline from it, the one that I can ride to glory, whether it's a general or getting a promotion, or a president getting some good headlines for the first time in 3 months, or we can say that, you know, the person who went after you know, my daddy, like George W. Bush said when he went into Iraq, you know, we got him pushed back and all that kind of stuff. It becomes something like that. And yet, you know, the well thought out plans and strategy. And, you know, when you play chess, they say a good chess player plays his opponent's game. He also plays 5 or 6 moves ahead, because he's got to look at the board and say, okay, I could do this, but if I do this, he'll probably do that. And then I could probably do that. But he's got to find the amount of moves that will be more injurious to his opponent. And that's how you win in chess. In war, the battle is won before you even get on it, according to The Art of War, as written so many centuries ago. But the fact is, what that statement is saying is, you have to have thought out the strategy. Okay, you're going to do this. They're going to probably do that, or maybe this. What do you do to that? And again, sort of the counter moves and stuff like that. Here, oh, well, they're retreating because there's no point in running up the anthill when it can't be taken. So what do I do? You know, they hadn't thought about that. So instead, he's, you know, fighting. He's firing on his own men, thinking that somehow that will get him the promotion by sending them out of the trenches again, because they're afraid that they'll be killed there. That's not thoughtful planning. There's no rhyme or reason to that strategy. It's a terrible one. And even at the end, when Dax is offered the promotion, you know, it's sort of a spontaneous thing that has no place at all in that conversation. But here it is. It's not been thought through either. And the Major General is just trying to save his own ass and try to get Dax on his side, because he's now got this hole in the leadership, and he knows that Dax really does care and is a good soldier. But it's not thought through. So I think this movie is also just saying that it becomes a game, and like boys with toys in a way, if they're not thinking with their heads. War is done with awful weapons that kill, and certainly violence is part of it. It's a shame that it comes to that, but none of that means anything if there isn't some strategy behind the might. Otherwise, it's just, you win for the day, but you don't win for the war. You just win for that battle with the might or the power or the luck you had that day, versus, okay, and tomorrow they'll come out and maybe they'll be stronger. So what do I do then to counter that?
Yeah. And the funniest thing is that this movie, it sort of repeats how history repeats itself, but at the same time, it's really a movie about how we gravitate more towards our ego than towards our compassion, and our strongest leaders are the ones who show more compassion than ego. You had FDR, who was a very strong president. I mean, he did some morally questionable things to the Japanese internment camps, but
right,
that was not one of his strong suits. And then you had President Obama, where he didn't walk around and brag about how he's going to kill bin Laden and stuff like that. He was very quiet. He was very calm. He was very collected. There's a great documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Manhunt or something like that. And it shows basically how, when they were in the war room during the whole operation where they invaded bin Laden's threshold, there was an enormous amount of restraint in that room where Obama and Clinton and everyone else was in there, where nobody cheered up and applauded and said, "We got him." They only applauded until the men returned home safe, because they worried about their safety. If someone like Maro and Brodard were in charge of that operation today, they wouldn't care if the guys died, as long as we killed bin Laden, and that's really the greatest flaw in a lot of our leadership, is that they try to project strength when really the people who try to act like they're the toughest or the strongest are the weakest. It's the people with compassion and heart. They're the ones who are the strongest, because it's easy to insult someone. It's easy to try to go and kill someone without thinking, because you want that immediate gratification of revenge. But really, leadership takes time. It takes patience. It takes empathy. And the greatest leaders that we've ever had were people who displayed that. And this is what happens when you try to show masculinity over compassion. And the saddest thing about this movie is that Colonel Dax was the one person who had that compassion, who tried to do the right thing. And unlike most movies where they get rewarded in the end, he ends up just kind of being cast aside and being thrown back out into the trenches to go back into war and to send his men to their death again.
Lest we forget that not only does he not get a promotion, but he goes back to the war, which is no promotion. It's like tomorrow he might die, or see other men die, or see other terrible decisions that get men killed as well. I think part of the problem here with this movie, and it's why I think a lot of the world wasn't ready for this then, and maybe we're still sort of mixed up about how to understand might and machismo and fighting and all that kind of stuff. When Pete Hegseth was asked about, the fact that there was a woman who was one of the bombers, and he was saying the boys with bombs, and he goes, "Oh, it's an expression, and that's the kind of DEI stuff we need to get rid of." It's like, well, but words matter, and again, they're taking that victory lap before we know everything, and they're using words that haven't been thought through, and there's a strategy to that too, and how to win the war in the hearts and minds of people at home too, and they're rookie dumb mistakes. They could have waited and said, "We hit our targets. We're hoping this is a deterrent. We don't know how much of one yet, but we will wait and see. But we do not want them to have these weapons, and we want them to, whatever. But instead saying it was obliterated. Just like, when Sean Spicer came out and said he had the biggest crowd size ever on his inauguration day. Don't believe your lying eyes. That's not true. I don't understand why in those instances, or in the instances in this film, that there isn't more thought put into all this stuff, but there isn't. They're acting like they're boys playing soldiers and changing the rules as they go along on the playground. But it isn't a playground. And yet these generals who are untouched and unsullied by it, or at least in the case of the major general, not really touched and hurt by it, because he seems to think his position is fine. He's able to play with careers, whether it's Dax or Brouillard's, or as well with the poor schmucks who got court-martialed and victims of the firing squad. There's just, I think what Kubrick is saying more than anything, and maybe the words that I don't know if this is the thing we all have to think about, is war and any kind of killing is the ultimate, as Clint Eastwood said in Unforgiven, you take away everything a man's got and everything he's going to have, or whatever. And it's kind of true here. When you end a life, when you kill somebody and shoot them, like you've exhausted all other means of yelling, stop, I'll shoot, hold it, or, diplomatic channels in war or whatever else, and you decide to kill somebody and take their life, it has real consequences. It's real dramatic. It's the ultimate action of negativity, of destruction. And it's given so little thought here.
Yeah,
and it's tragic.
Yeah, and there's total incompetency in the war. Like we have that one character, like Major Rajet or something like that, the drunk guy. Like basically, he goes out, he climbs up into the trenches, and instead of waiting for his guy to come back to see if he makes it to the other side of the line in the middle of the night, trying to invade the Germans' territory, he loses his patience, pulls a grenade, throws it, realizes he killed his own guy, and doesn't feel anything about it, which was the scariest part. And they show a little bit of humanity with him in the end when Kirk Douglas gives him the assignment to go out and lead the execution of the soldiers who displayed cowardice on the battlefield. He doesn't want to do it. But in a way, Kirk Douglas is going, yeah, but you killed your own guys. You weren't being responsible. Now I want you to feel the burden of this guilt. And there is that guilt there, even like when they're putting the blindfolds on everyone. There's the last soldier they walk up to. He says, do you want a blindfold? And very calmly, because he just knows he's going to die, he accepts it. He says, no. And he just pauses and he goes, I'm sorry. And I kind of question, are you sorry? Or do you know if you're sorry? Maybe you think you're sorry, but you're not. And it's sad how major incompetency is handled within the military. Like someone like Rajet should not be in any position of authority because he's completely incompetent. But of course, the guys who end up getting made an example of are people who did nothing wrong. You had, and I'm going to pull up their names here. You had Corporal Paris, who was chosen because his commanding officer, Rajet, wishes him to keep from testifying about what happened in the scouting mission. Yeah, you had Private Farrell, who's picked by the commanding officer because he's a social and undesirable, which, what was the actor's name who played him? I have him in my notes here, but it's like, not Tony, but
Joe Turco?
Timothy Carey.
Oh, Timothy Carey.
Yeah, because he's a social undesirable. He's the guy where it's like, if you're in society, people won't give you a chance.
And his name is even Farrell, which is almost like he's feral.
Yeah, exactly.
little on the nose there. That, but and Ralph
Arnaud's just chosen at random. Just like, well, I don't know. Just put
and it's interesting too because I think in some respects what Kubrick also might be working on another level of sort of layers of meaning here is, you look at, like you said, you look at Maro and wonder if Maro, because of that scar on his cheek, knows what it was like to fight and maybe, for lack of a better example of a phrase, stayed too long at the dance, like he's lost perspective. At this point, he's so sort of jaded and numbed by it all that the only thing left for him and keeps him sort of going is ambition, maybe to get a higher up thing or maybe get less connected to the actual fighting and killing. Who knows? But then you get, those examples that you said where, how they're not touched as much by it as that you think they would be. I mean, I think Dax is because Dax is a defense attorney. Like, he knows what a victim is, and he knows how people can get railroaded, and you have to prove things, and you have to make your case. Again, you have to have the plan. You have to have the words and the strategy and the plotting out right before you can condemn a man to prison. So that's very important to him, as I think our war plans and actual legitimate strategy. Like, how do we actually take the hill, the anthill? What do we do if we get shot on and we lose half of our thing? We retreat, just run away. That's not a strategy. And even at the end, I mean, I think, the film, when it first came out, apparently was criticized, and some people thought it was very even colder than just the anti-war film that it clearly was, by having the soldiers sort of getting drunk and drinking in the bar, and like, they've quickly forgotten sort of this awful thing that happened. But I think what that was showing was the numbness of war. That, they have to go back to do it tomorrow. So you can't begrudge them, doing what they can do, sort of medicate themselves to get through the night. As Sinatra used to say, whether it's, booze, broads, or I forget whatever the other one was. He said, whatever gets you through the night. And that's kind of the same with these soldiers. So you can't necessarily decry that they're somehow being insensitive when they have the toughest job on the planet and they may get killed tomorrow. So let them have their frivolity and their drunkenness and their shoot, whooping and hollering, whatever. But it's really, Dax is the one figure who can't do that. He's in charge of too many men. He's too moral. He's there fighting for, dare I say, the right reasons, at least he thinks they are, and wants things to be smart and proper and well thought out, just like he would as a lawyer creating a defense, particularly one for somebody who may be mistreated or bamboozled by certain elements of those that can do that to the lower classes in the law. Yeah. But it's like nobody walks away unscathed. Some people are more numb. Some people lose their jobs. Some people lose their hope. Some people just have to go back and suck it up and do it another day. Not a good thing about war. And even when you win war, even when you are victorious, and we can all be very proud that we defeated Hitler and the Axis countries and stuff like that. It's it's still affecting. It still created a lot of post-traumatic stress and problems and, guilt and shame and problems that we still are sort of wrestling with from other countries. Here we are 67 years later. So war is just, there shouldn't be any pro-war people in the world. There should only be anti-war people. It should really be the last resort. And yet a lot of people who want to be hawks think that it's super simple, and it never is.
Yeah. And the ending, I guess when I was doing my research, I guess there was a point of contention with it because people didn't understand it. But I thought the ending was, for me, pretty understandable. And part of it was your point, which is these guys are just trying to get their minds off of things. And at first they appear as savages in the scene because when they bring up the German girl who
they're being rude to her.
By Stanley Kubrick, who she ended up marrying him after this movie. That was Christine Kubrick.
Yeah.
I can't remember her maiden name, but
it was Suzanne Christian. That was her name as credited in the film's titles.
Okay. So when they bring her up on stage, there's tears going down her eyes. They're like, we're going to make her sing a song. We're going to, come on. Like this woman is clearly like really terrified. But these guys are celebrating in her pain. But immediately when she starts singing the song that she sings, which, by the way, the song is an old German song about a little boy who's away from home. And when he comes back, his ailing love is dying, which is sort of an allegory for if these guys do come back home, a part of them is dead because war has destroyed their lives. And I think when they start getting emotional and tearing up during her song, it showed actually that you can't kill the human spirit because in the end, we're still together. Although this person is on the other side, they feel her pain. And instead of enjoying it, they end up empathizing with it, or at least sympathizing with it. And they drew a connection to her that was beautiful because at this moment, these guys are sharing a moment of solidarity where Germans and the French are together. and they're not fighting. They're actually getting along. But of course, there's that order that comes to Kirk Douglas from outside the bar or the brothel or whatever, and he says to him, "You're okay. Your men are going to come out and fight again tomorrow. So get them ready." And he says, "Well, give them a moment. Give them like one moment to enjoy themselves before the Germans and the French kill each other again." So I think it was really about that, about how pointless it is that we destroy each other, and really how our empathy is what could bring us together.
We have the ability to overcome horniness, sexism, tribalism, and bond as people, as they do with that girl when she starts singing, until we're reminded by the war machine to put that humanity in check.
Yep, put it away. You're going to
put it away, folks.
Person,
you had it for 10 minutes. That's plenty. Back to being a killer.
Yeah, and the most interesting thing, and Kirk Douglas saved this movie because in order to, and I think it was MGM who was the studio at the time, in order to sell the movie, Kubrick did have the idea that they changed the ending where instead of the men getting executed in the end, they would be saved. And Kirk Douglas marched into his office, yelled every obscenity of the book at him, and told him, "Don't you dare change this ending." And he was right. Because if they had that ending where the guys were saved, it would have ruined the movie completely. And because it has a sad ending and an honest ending, it preserves the test of time. And I'm kind of shocked that Kubrick was the guy who wanted to.
Well, I think in those days he was still a little bit young. I think he was only 28 when he made this movie, so he might still have been a little bit worried about the studio system and stuff. He certainly didn't get that way in another 20 years, where he insisted on multiple takes and doing things exactly the way he wanted, which is great. I'm a big fan.
He did that in this movie too. He did like 70 takes on scenes.
Oh yeah, he's one of my favorite filmmakers. So good for him. But I love the fact too that Kirk Douglas was one of those guys who fought for the better scripts and the better write. I mean, he did Spartacus, which was also very much a sort of anti-war film, and he even fought to get Don Trumbull to write it after the McCarthy hearings and the blacklists. So he's been on the right side of a lot of different things like this. I can tell you a quick story before we end, just if you don't mind. It's about Kirk Douglas, to give him props. When he won the American Film Institute Life Achievement Award, so many decades ago, he got up and during his speech, he mentioned about how he was cast originally as Colonel Trask, the Richard Crenna role in the very first Rambo movie entitled First Blood. And he talked about how the original script, Colonel Trask was supposed to take John Rambo away from what had been and kill him because he's this killing machine that he's not going to be able to turn it off. He's been trained too well. All this drama that he had created, it wasn't going to stop. And the easiest thing would be to put him down like he's almost a dog. As brutal as an ending as was, Kirk Douglas was amazed that they were going to make this movie as a anti-war film and this sort of statement about, kind of humanity. And when they filmed Kirk Douglas's scenes, they decided that they were going to change that ending so Rambo could live, because I think somebody got greedy and said, this might be a new superhero or big hero character that Stallone can play again. And Kirk Douglas quit. He walked off the set, and they had to bring in Crenna and redo all the scenes and obviously shoot that ending as it was now written. And Kirk Douglas said, when he was getting the Life Achievement Award, that movie went on to make, I forget how much, $300 million. But he goes, but I was right. In other words,
he was.
He may have made the money, but the right idea for that script and that story was the one that I signed on to, and I was right to quit. I love that he said that during kind of his last hurrah, getting that Life Achievement Award from the American Film Institute. And he basically said, here's the problem, guys. Watch out for it next time.
Yeah. I would have preferred, they actually do have that ending where Rambo gets killed by, I can't remember.
Colonel Trask.
Yeah, by Colonel Trask. I'm trying to remember the actor's name.
Like the DVD. Richard Crenna.
Richard Crenna. Oh, okay. I thought it was Brian Dennehy talks to him.
No, Brian Dennehy was the bad sheriff in it.
Oh, darn. Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. See, I haven't seen that movie in forever. But yeah, it's
a very good movie, and people forget.
It is.
It's very different from the Rambo movies.
Yeah, yeah. Because the great thing is, if he killed him in the end, that would have solidified the point that these guys come back home, and some of them are so screwed up that they don't know how to handle life, so they just go on psycho killing sprees. And I think that would have been the proper way to end Rambo, to end that message. And instead, like you said, they turn him into a hero. He goes to Vietnam. He fights the bad guys, and he wins.
And I
in the
think how
end.
many films did they get out of it? 5, I think,
Uh,
3 or 4
yeah,
sequels.
and they all
It's kind of
suck.
like Megan 2.0. It's like, she was a killer robot that was in a horror movie in the first one. They
Yeah.
forgot that with the making of the second movie. It's
Oh,
very
no.
funny and certainly entertaining, but that character is supposed to be like Chucky and kind of a bad character. But I guess somebody in Hollywood said, we can't wrap a franchise around a villain. Yeah, you can.
Yeah. The great thing
Just
about
don't want to.
Yeah. The great thing about sad endings is that they give you much more to think about. Because there's so
I
many
agree.
movies with happy endings. Like, for instance, Materialists. Like, I loved that movie, but I felt like the last 30 minutes were just giving the audience what they know they want to see. It's like,
Well, it's funny because to your very point about romantic dramas or comedies, maybe not romantic comedies. I guess they have to end up upbeat, but romantic dramas, is this one definitely leans more towards, or things like Celine Song's previous film, Past Lives, or other. I think the better romantic dramas tend to end up with the couple not together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Way We Were, or Gone with the Wind, to Casablanca. I mean, just to name 3 that would, I think, spring to mind of a lot of people off the top of their heads. Those romantic dramedies do not end with a couple together, and I think they're more memorable and more impactful because of that.
Yeah, or take horror films. The Mist wouldn't be a memorable film if it weren't for that horrific ending.
Yeah, it's one of the most brutal endings of any horror film ever.
Love it.
Or The
love
Descent.
it.
Or The Descent, where it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that she gets out. Like, she's still underneath that muck, and with those marauders breathing down her neck. It's like, yeah, it was a mistake to go down there, and you're still going to pay for it. Yeah, I love it when, and they do all that now as to keep you scared as you go into the parking lot. But when it's a legitimate thing where it's scary, like at the plot of The Mist or The Descent and some others like that. Mm-hmm. It's very scary. I mean, or even tragic. I mean, I think the ending of Psycho is tragic, where Norman has been so screwed up by his mother that he's now become her, and he looks at us, and as Simon Oakland, as a psychiatrist, says, he's never coming back. His mother has taken over. Yeah,
everyone to him is just like a fly. He can kill it or just let it go, and in the end, he's like, screw it.
They're watching.
Sure.
They'll say, see, look, she wouldn't hurt a fly.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the brilliance of this movie, is that it takes people, because when you see those 3 guys getting executed and you see that legitimate fear that they're all facing. I mean, there's even a great scene, and I got to get the actor's name, but he also played Lloyd in The Shining, and Joe Turkel.
Joe Turkel, that's right. Joe Turkel is in it. That's right. Yeah. And of course, Ralph Meeker, who had a pretty good career in movies and TV in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. He did a lot of stuff too. That's right. Joe Turkel is the guy who is the bartender in. I love the fact that Kubrick cast him again.
Yeah, like 20 years later.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
That was 57.
I think The Shining was 80, wasn't it?
Yeah, so they must have been filming in 79. So
yeah.
But there's that great scene with Joe Turkel where the priest comes in. He is talking to Tim Curry, and he's telling him, "Oh, you want to see your last rites? So what do you want to pray to God for?" And then Joe Turkel walks up to him and he says, "What's the point of this religion? What's the point of this deity with any of it if we're going to die in the end? Obviously, God doesn't care about us. So why should I pray to him?" And it wasn't like a denouncement of religion as much as it was like a denouncement of the idea of a deity that is supposed to reward us for our good behavior. But yet when we do behave,
somehow it's transactional. I mean, I know we're probably going a little bit long and maybe even a little bit off the subject, but I think it's interesting. I love the fact, Mike, that you said that, because I think what is very true is I think that we try to put so much of humanity on God. And even though it says in the Bible, God created man in his image, that doesn't mean every part about us is that way, including us needing constant ego stroking. If we truly believe there is a deity that create the heavens and the earth, I don't think he needs us to sing to him every second of the day. I think that he's probably confident enough that, hey, I'm kind of in a superior position here, and I would love you to appreciate it, but if you curse my name or don't sing so many things or say so many Hail Marys or whatever, I'm going to strike you down. I would hate to think that anybody really thinks that that's the kind of God we're praying to, or the kind of whatever creator figure there is. But I think, in the situation with war here, it's a righteous and a rightful place, because where is God in war? Everybody who walks out on the battlefield thinks that their God is on their side. Righteousness is on their side. And I'm not so sure that if we believe in thou shalt not kill, then why are we so ready to go to war and kill other people? That should be considered the ultimate sin, whether it's sanctioned by the state or not. So, I think it raises a lot of questions, just like the character that was played by Joe Turkel, that ask, really, what are we presuming here, and what are we marching and fighting with? What auspices and dare I say directives are we under? Not only literally do we have any real battle plans, because the idea should be to shorten the war and to have smarter strategic thinking that makes this not go on so long. But also then, how do we justify where we stand in relationship to God, when war, which is the ultimate, to me, sort of way of evil in many respects, shouldn't really have God attached to it at all.
No. And war is like sports in a lot of ways. You either win or you lose. And then there's always those athletes who point up in the air when they score a touchdown or they hit a home run. Like, that's right. God wanted you to get the home run and not the other guy to strike you out. That makes sense. And that's kind of the hypocrisy when it comes to religion. And of course, God, for some reason, always wants money. He's always a little short on it, to quote George Carlin. But that's the funny thing. It's like, when it comes to God, when it comes to our institutions, we don't know what we're doing. We're
we know what we're doing. We're just telling people the reason we're doing it, and they aren't really buying it because it's not very logical.
Yeah.
Again, don't believe your lying eyes. We'll tell you it's because of this, but I think it's because of some other things.
Yeah,
it's not very
really
honest about it.
Yeah, it's really a tale about how we try to further ourselves rather than try to further the betterment of other men.
Yeah.
But having wrapped that up, we're gonna give this our Guinness rating. So,
all right, get out the Guinness glasses.
Yeah. So, out of 4 Guinnesses, what would you give this movie?
This I would give 5 if I could, but since there's only 4, I'm going to give it 4.
Yeah. You know what? I am on the same boat with you. This is a 4 Guinness film. It's a movie that you don't see a lot of war movies like this today. They're graphic, they're violent, but they don't make a true stance or an opinion on war, which I think controversial films, depending on the subtext of the controversy, are much more effective than movies that aren't controversial. For instance, JFK, is that movie accurate? I don't think so, but it really captures the madness of that time and sort of how humanity just tears each other apart because they want answers. And this movie is sort of about the insanity and savagery of men, and it's a very cynical film, but all of Kubrick's movies are very cynical, and I mean, his outview of life I mostly agree with. And I mean, for Kubrick movie, this was his early filmography where his movies are shorter. This movie's very short. It's only an hour 25 minutes, but every single scene has an intention and a purpose. It moves beautifully, and it's a film that, after you see it, you'll be pissed off, and you should be pissed off, because this kind of crap keeps happening. And this movie is a great lesson to show how we can make people in power accountable through the power of the people. I think if all those soldiers decided not to go into battle, they couldn't kill them all. But
and I also think at the end of the day, it goes to the root cause, and that is, have we exhausted all other measures of trying to figure out a way to end this conflict? And Oh, well, it's just like when the judge tells a jury, go back and think about it some more because I want a verdict. Go back and work a little bit more on the diplomacy channel because war is just not a right answer.
No, it's not. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Or that is basically what the overall, I guess, the nutshell of it is. But Jeff, as always, thank you for coming on and talking about this movie. I mean, of course, immediately when the whole Iran thing happened, I said, well, I got to exploit this for numbers. No, I said,
Well, I like what you're doing. I like the fact that you're talking about these movies from, dare I say, yesteryear or from a while ago that people should know. If they're not on their radar, they should know. And if they are, and they are familiar with them, it's a good time to revisit them because of these topical news stories that sort of make these films seem all the more relevant and in context to be discussed again.
yeah. And so, Jeff, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Always.
Is
Always
there
a pleasure.
anything you want to plug before we take off?
Well, I mean, if people want to read my movie reviews or I sometimes write about television as well, they can do so at the establishingshot.org, which is my movie site. I also write for Pipeline Artists a couple times every month about that's pipelineartist.com, an artist a website about the arts. I write about film and television there in sort of essay form. I do 1-minute movie reviews on TikTok, just like you, Mike. I'm Jeff York, Chicago there. And sometimes I even show me drawing a caricature that accompanies a movie or a show that I particularly like or left an impression on me. And you can follow me on Instagram at Jeff York Chicago as well. And I also have Jeff York caricatures on Instagram as well and website. So if you ever want me to draw your favorite movie, TV show, or celebrity, or a family member, or a dog, or something like that, just let me know.
Right.
So
And
that's about covering the most of it. I'm also single, and no, I'm just used to be married, but no longer.
Yeah, as it goes sometimes.
Yes. How about that for covering the gamut?
Yeah.
I was going to give him a drawing assignment, but maybe I'll see if I can call my sister, who's also divorced and single. No, just kidding.
Yeah. And if you want to find my stuff, am I single or not? I don't know. Maybe you guys can find out. But if you want to see my stuff, go to ypareviews.com. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. You can find me on X at YPA Reviews, Facebook at You'll Probably Agree, and you can find me on TikTok at YPA Reviews Chicago. And of course, YouTube is my main outlet. And of course, you have SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Music. You'll be able to listen to this podcast as well. But please join us in a few days on July 1st, where Jeff and I think Don Shanahan will be joining us. And I will be talking about The American President, a movie I've actually never seen, so I'm excited to see it.
Wow.
Jeff has some sort of love for the Douglases. He has Kirk Douglas.
I do. What is that about? Wow. I should be on their payroll or something over here.
They're great artists. I will forever love Michael Douglas for producing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So, yeah, absolutely. So, guys, thank you for watching. If you like what you see, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. And we will see you later. Hopefully, this war won't go out for too long. But honestly, then that's just kind of war's going forever. So we'll see you on the battlefield. Okay, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.